President,
Senator from Kansas.
I ask unanimous consent to suspend the quorum call.
Without objection.
Mr. President, on National Police Week, we celebrate our law enforcement officers, but it's also important to pause and honor those who gave their lives in the line of duty. And then we pause and remember the families they left behind. Last year, I stood in this chamber as we unanimously adopted the National Police Week resolution and honored the 576 law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty in 2021. Today, I take this moment to honor the 246 brave men and women who were killed in the line of duty in 2022. In order to rightfully honor these men and women who lost their lives, we must continue to demand policies that will make our communities safer and, by extension, our officers in the line of duty safer. This topic is incredibly personal to me. My father was the chief of police in our hometown of El Dorado, Kansas for 30 years. A picture I share of my father in 1965, a proud new police officer with our family dog and police officer dog, Rennie. On more than one occasion, my dad put his life on the line to protect our community. And on many other days, he would tell stories of the bravery and courage of his officers when responding to an emergency. These were all my friends, but they were heroes in my eyes as well, and always will be remembered as such. But today I'm sad to report that our men and women in law enforcement feel demoralized. They're constantly put in a no-win situation, and their own city governments are setting them up to fail. In short, like my dad told me recently on a fishing trip, law enforcement officers know this White House and many mayor and city councils do not have their backs. They feel abandoned, and they feel like they get no respect, even to the point of being wrongfully shamed. These brave men and women need our support now more than ever. Democrat-ran cities have demonized law enforcement, making it harder for our men and women in uniform to do their jobs. And sadly, their dangerous rhetoric and policies are emboldening criminals at the expense of our officers. You don't have to look any further than our own nation's capital. In November of last year, here in Washington, the D.C. Council voted to dramatically reform the city's criminal code to favor the rights of the offender during a crime wave across the district. The legislation eliminated mandatory minimum sentences for most crimes and lowered the maximum penalties for crimes such as carjacking and robbery. The reforms to the city's criminal code came as the city's crime crisis hit a fever pitch. Listen to this. Our nation's capital had 203 homicides in 2022. Our nation's capital, 203 homicides. Carjackings have tripled since 2019. This year so far, violent crime is up by double digits. Last year, a physician was murdered after he tried to prevent a carjacker from stealing his car. A city council candidate had his car stolen at gunpoint. More recently, a Senate staffer was brutally attacked and stabbed in the head in broad daylight. Mr. President, I remain fearful for my staff as they walk from their homes to the Capitol. Just recently, I gathered with a group of senators to discuss policy, but the topic of discussion soon became the safety of our employees and what we could do to help ensure their safety. With the culture of lawlessness on the streets being embraced by the D.C. City Council, at a time of low morale and increased crime, it's no wonder why the city's lost over 1,200 officers over the last 2 years, a number that's growing each day. We need to stop here and talk about the culture of lawlessness started by this White House. It's starting during his campaign with the summer of applauding violent riots and vandalism. After being sworn in, the administration purposely and shamelessly opened our borders. And even now, this administration turns their heads to violent criminals and terrorists crossing our borders. And with the Democrats embracing cashless bail in Joe Biden's America, we're now not only a country without borders, but also a lawless society, where criminals roam the streets and fentanyl poisons our children. This nation must change its course before it's too late. To preserve this union, we need law and order, Our republic will not survive without it. I rise today in support of Senator Vance's motion to nullify the D.C. Council's Comprehensive Policy and Justice Reform Amendment Act of 2022. By passing this resolution, we can now join our House colleagues in firmly rejecting the Council's anti-police, pro-criminal laws and reaffirm our support for our heroic law enforcement officers. I urge all my Senate colleagues in the White House to choose people over politics by joining our efforts to improve public safety in Washington, D.C. With its passage, we can send a clear message to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. We in the Senate will not stand by while our law enforcement officers are vilified and cut off at the knees when trying to do their job. And with its passage, we'll make Washington, D.C. a safer place for the millions of visitors who pilgrimage to this great capital to petition their elected members of Congress, to regale on our history, and celebrate our freedom. This is a bill that makes D.C. safer, but it also sends a message to the entire country, a message that we want safe streets, we want safe communities, we want safe schools, and we want to do it in a bipartisan way. Let's signal to every county, every city, and every state that Washington, D.C. will no longer be soft in crime and cater to criminals. I yield back.